we've got different people coming up to read the 3 gospel passages. They're printed for you on the 3rd page of the bulletin, so you can follow along there. They'll also be up on the screen, the first of the sermon slides. We'll have the texts up there. And so I invite you to come to the microphone when it's your piece. Here's what I want you to think about as you listen to these stories. What does Jesus do on Easter? What does he do on Easter? And the corollary to that is, what doesn't he do? So listen to the text. What does he do? What doesn't he do?
Matthew 28, verses 1 through 6. After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord, descending from heaven, came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised, as he said."
In John chapter 20, 3 to 16.
Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. Mary Magdalene did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned to him and said, "Teacher."
And Luke 24.
On that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. Later, Jesus himself stood among the disciples and said to them, "Peace be with you." While in their joy they were disbelieving and still wondering, he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence.
So what does Jesus do on Easter? And I've got the sermon mostly up on the slides. I do this because I am hard of hearing, and this helps other people who are hard of hearing. If they're distracting for you, look away. If they're helpful and you're sort of generally staring in this direction, I will not think that you have spaced out and are going somewhere else. The question is, what has Jesus been doing all weekend? We know that on Friday, he descended into hell. My God, why have you forsaken me?" We looked at that a little bit on Friday night in our Good Friday service. Here is my understanding of hell. Hell is where God is not. Heaven is where God is. And all of the images that we get of hell being a place of fire and damnation, and there's some references to that make that one metaphor, one image. But my understanding of hell is that that's where God is not. God has forsaken Jesus, therefore he is in hell. And hell is where God is not, which means there's no music there. There's no beauty there. There's no flowers. I think back to the Narnia stories when it's always winter but never Christmas. Hell is where God is not. And Jesus is willing to enter into that piece of time where he is separated from God, and therefore from his own self. So on Friday, he has endured the worst of all that ever happened to him in his incarnated life. Later that same day, Jesus was in paradise, along with the man who died next to him. And I want you to imagine the welcome that he received. Jesus, in this piece of the story, Jesus is home again in his Father's house of many rooms. And can you just imagine the rejoicing that goes on as all of heaven welcomes him? And then, so that's what he's been doing. Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning. Imagine his surprise when he once again finds himself in human form. He has been in paradise. He's experienced what it is to be the fullness of God again. And then on Sunday, he finds himself in human form. And angels have come with him. He's not alone. And those angels roll the stone away, and light floods the tomb. And Jesus stretches his arms and his legs, only to find that he's wrapped up in grave clothes. So the angels gently free him and offer him new clothes, because the soldiers had gambled away his old ones. All he had left were these grave clothes. And the text tells us that the face cloth that had bound him was set aside, and it was neatly rolled. Did the angels fold it with such care? Or did Jesus? So Jesus dresses and he goes outside. And at first he just walks around the garden to get the stiffness out. The creator of the universe has always liked gardens. You will remember that's where the whole story starts. So Jesus is there. He is walking around the garden. And I think he pulled a few weeds, because his hands are dirty. Otherwise, why would Mary think he was the gardener? I don't know, maybe his knees were muddy from kneeling down, and I don't know, maybe he had made a crown of flowers. Somehow, he has been gardening on Easter morning. So Jesus lingers near the tomb long enough to greet some of his friends. He has a long conversation with Mary Magdalene, with Mary the Tower, this woman who became a tower of strength in the early church. And then he greets the other women who have come to tend his body. Sadly, he's moved on by the time the men get to the tomb. There's always something to be said for getting up early to do the chores. As the city begins to wake up around him, Jesus' story becomes even more curious because he heads away from and not towards Jerusalem. And I have this huge question. Why? Why did Jesus not walk into town and drop by the temple for morning prayers? Why did he not drop by the temple to show the serious religious who won? Why did he not appear in the palace and sneak up behind Pilate and yell, "Boo!" Why no triumphal entry today? There were heavenly choirs when he was born. Why is it so quiet today? There are just a few spooked Roman soldiers staggering into town with an unbelievable story. So why? Why instead does Jesus choose to go for a long walk? I still think it's something about getting the stiffness out of his bones. I think he's walking to savor his return to the physical world, strong and healthy. I think some of it has to do with the anonymity that death bought him. Because for the first time in a long time, Jesus is walking around with no crowds surrounding him. So he can go where he pleases. It could be the sunny weather, because Google says that it's about 71 degrees in Jerusalem in April. He heads towards Emmaus. It's a town about 7 miles away from Jerusalem. And he starts to pass 2 other walkers, but he pauses when he hears them talking about him. So he joins them, and they talk about the Bible for a while. And the conversation is so good that the travelers invite Jesus to stay for lunch so they can keep talking. He's back in Jerusalem in time for dinner with the disciples. What do you notice about all of those actions? Jesus' actions on Sunday are so calm. They are so peaceful. They're so intimate. He folds laundry with the angels. He does a little light gardening. I don't think he was out there rototilling. A little light gardening. He takes a long walk. And he talks about the Bible with some people who are also interested in talking about the Bible. He has lunch out. And he is home in time for dinner with his friends. He is risen from the dead, and this is what he does. I have to think that the story that Mary Magdalene told about her thinking Jesus was the gardener, I think she said it with a voice full of laughter. She told this story like, "Oh my gosh, you guys, I just thought he was the gardener, but it was Jesus." It's such a simple story. And Jesus' choices on Easter Sunday have to mean something for us as followers of the resurrected Jesus. If Jesus could go for a walk on this important day, like just a walk, it wasn't a pilgrimage. He wasn't even fundraising for anything. He was not raising money per mile that he walked. If he could just go for a walk on this important day, maybe we can too. Maybe the weight of the world is not on our shoulders because it is on his. If Jesus spent his day with a handful of people, maybe that's what we are meant to do. maybe we are meant to tend to people, some new ones, and our closest friends. If Jesus came back as a gardener, then tending the earth is something God cares about, because the creator of the universe has always liked gardens. Walking, tending, befriending are never a waste of time. This was Jesus' strategy for reaching the whole world. He doesn't go to Rome and pop up in Caesar's face. He doesn't go to the temple and take on the serious religious. He walks, he tends, and he befriends. That's his strategy, and it worked, or we would not be gathered here today. Jesus saw a handful of women who had come to take care of him. 2 walkers, 10 or more disciples on Easter Day, and somehow out of that small start grew the church universal. So what if we do with our lives what the risen Christ did with his? Lord God, help us to keep this image of Jesus in our minds and to follow this Jesus who did these small, careful things that changed the world. Give us eyes to see and hearts to be open and hands to serve and feet to go into places where we are needed. And we ask this in the name of the risen Christ. Amen.